So I'm going to argue that nothing kills tension and suspense faster than bad CGI. Here's my proof. Imagine it's 2001. You're happily watching The Mummy Returns. You're enjoying the effortless performance from Brendan Fraser and all the high-energy set pieces. Then, all of a sudden, a door opens, the fighting stops, and both actors look towards a scary-looking, dark, shadowy monster. The music ramps up and the camera zooms into the growling being that's starting to slowly reveal itself by moving into the light. You brace yourself. This is definitely going to be scary, and maybe even terrifying. And this. A cute version of the Scorpion King that has just escaped from a PS2 game. Not remotely scary at all, and definitely not an adequate payoff for all that cinematic buildup. I'll be honest, this is the scene that caused me to check out of The Mummy Returns early, and I know many people that felt the same way. Now, just imagine what happens when a whole movie looks and feels just like this moment. Allow me to introduce you to a movie called Delgo from 2008. This movie was ambitious, really ambitious. A fully animated feature with a huge budget of $40 million. They also went all out on the cast, bringing in big names like Freddie Prinze Junior, Val Kilmer, and Jennifer Love Hewitt. The story follows a fantasy world full of warring tribes, magic, and epic battles. With that type of lineup, story, and budget, you'd expect Pixar-level animation, right? But instead, it seems they spent all that money and used up all that star power to end up with a feature animation that looks like this. I'm sure you're not shocked to find out that almost no one showed up for this thing at the theater. Delgo made only about $915,000 worldwide on that $40 million budget I mentioned earlier. $915,000. I also read somewhere that it took 9 years to make. 9 years to make this? Anyway, let's move on to Spawn from 1997. The movie was supposed to launch a new superhero franchise, and it was based on the popular comic character created by Todd McFarlane. On paper, it looked promising. It had a big visual effects budget, a dark tone, and a storyline that was meant to stand out from the lighter superhero films of the time. And it had the potential to be a huge hit. They even managed to secure a $40 million budget. And then, the icing on the cake, they brought in Michael Jai White as the lead. Martin Sheen was cast as a corrupt government agent, and John Leguizamo took on the role of the grotesque, clown-like villain. On paper, this sounded like it could be as successful as, say, one of the Blade movies, or maybe even become a new Batman. But then, they dropped the first trailer. And, well, take a look for yourself. While the visual effects were ambitious for the era, they were still below the standards of the late 90s, and they definitely have not aged well. And then there's the tone, which awkwardly moves between dark comic book grit and over-the-top acting. The reviews were overwhelmingly bad. Even diehard fans of the comic struggled to connect with it. At the box office, it only managed $122 million worldwide, and it fell far short of what you'd expect from a $40 million movie. And it's hard to take a film seriously when the graphics are this bad. They probably should have just cut out the CGI and focused on a more grounded character study, much like Logan. Next up is Mortal Kombat Annihilation, 1997. So here's the thing. The first Mortal Kombat movie in 1995 had been a surprise hit, pulling in $122 million worldwide on a budget of just $20 million. Yeah, it didn't win over the critics, but it found its audience and became a cult favorite. The sequel, however, well, that was a completely different story. Mortal Kombat Annihilation had a bigger budget of $30 million, but it's really hard to see where the money went. The visual effects look bad and unfinished, even for its time. The fight choreography was sloppy, and the story felt like a rushed mess that crammed in far too many characters with no development. Also, a lot of the original cast was replaced, which upset fans who were invested in the first movie. The result was a film that alienated even the most loyal Mortal Kombat followers. Mortal Kombat Annihilation limped to just $51 million worldwide, barely covering its production and marketing costs. The brand was damaged so badly by the poor reception of Annihilation that it took almost 25 years before there was an attempt at creating another live-action Mortal Kombat film. Next up is Jaws 3D from 1983. After the first two Jaws movies became massive hits, the studio wanted to squeeze out even more money from the franchise with a new 3D gimmick. The film had a budget of around $18 million, and it promised bigger sharks, bigger scares, and a highly engaging 3D spectacle. Instead, what we got was this: a total mismatch between visual depth and lighting. The 3D looked so out of place and just drew attention to itself rather than enhancing the tension. And honestly, the sharks were meant to terrify, but looked like clumsy puppets floating in front of green screen water. And the scenes that should have been suspenseful became unintentionally hilarious. In essence, not having the sharks look somewhat believable completely destroyed the tension and makes it difficult to get invested in the story. But the problems with the movie didn't end with CGI. It also struggled with its plot. It tried to cram in too many ideas. There's a water park subplot, a handful of new characters, and a chase sequence with underwater tunnels. Basically, it lacked the claustrophobic intensity of the first Jaws. The movie grossed about $88 million worldwide. Sure, that's enough to make back the production budget, but nowhere near enough to leave a lasting impact. Then there's The Langoliers from 1995, based on a Stephen King novella. This TV miniseries had a budget of about $3 to $5 million. It promised suspense, mystery, and a chilling exploration of time itself. Instead, what we got was this. I mean, yes, the basic plot outline was enough to generate intrigue when it first came out in 1995. And some of the bad CGI attracted a weird and morbid curiosity. And despite its obvious flaws, The Langoliers pulled in a big audience when it first aired. With a modest $3 to $5 million budget and no theatrical release, it certainly didn't lose money. But I would argue that its low-quality visual effects are what kept it from becoming a truly memorable Stephen King adaptation. The poor special effects turned what could have been an interesting horror thriller into an unintentional comedy. Which is a shame because you can tell that some of the actors were really giving it their all, and some of the performances show real commitment. And over time, the film became a cult classic. And today, the CGI is actually pretty funny. Something that's unintentionally hilarious and is in the "that's so bad it's good" category, like Birdemic or The Room.